So how did the things like coffee cart get through?
There are 2 food concessions that are already occupied and they've got them.
So we'll move on to item 5.
I'll just back to move the suggested resolution.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alison.
It's a while since I've sat here in front
just
of you.
introduce the item.
Yes.
It looks as though it's going to be a bit of a mechanical one. So
The background to this is that we've received a indication from the Lakeland Bowling and Sports Club that they are no longer viable as a club. They wish to wind up, and as part of doing that, they wish to sell their premises on the Waipahihi Reserve. The premises are already occupied by Kitty Corp, who run an after-school program out of the building, and in behind the bowling greens, the back part of the bowling club lease area is occupied by the Taupo Community Gardens Trust. So there are, I guess, 2 options today. One is that the council can consider the request of the Lakeland Bowling Club to surrender their lease, but require that they remove all of their improvements and reinstate the ground and just turn it back into reserve, which is what the lease would actually require, or that we can work with the current occupants of the land and allow the bowling club to realise some of the value of their assets and to transfer the assets to Kitty Corp and continue to allow the land to be used by Kitty Corp to run a community kindy and by the Taupo Community Gardens Trust. Now, you may be wondering why I'm not recommending in this case that we need to change the management plan in order to be able to process applications for new leases. And the reason I'm treating this slightly different to the previous item is that because in this case the management plan simply doesn't contemplate the use of the bowling club area for these purposes. When we last met with the bowling club back in 2009 when we were doing the management plan, they were quite strong. They had joined forces with a country music club. They had a lot of members. There was no suggestion at that stage that they wouldn't continue. So it wasn't that the management plan didn't allow new leases, it was just that that wasn't even contemplated at that stage. So although leases for other purposes aren't provided for in the management plan, they're not contrary to the management plan either. So in this case, if we wanted to go down that track, it would just be a case of advertising the intent to grant leases for other purposes in that area.
So, Alison, the Community Garden Trust, how did we treat them? They don't have a lease then. They just
popped them in there.
Popped them in the corner, didn't we? Because there was
popped them in there to see what would happen. Because at that stage we weren't sure that they would be viable.
Yeah.
So we just gave them a bit of time and space to get themselves sorted and said, we'll come back and deal with that later. And that was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
So this is probably a very good time to sort that out because there may be a bit of juggling of boundaries between the Community Gardens Trust and Kitty Corp, and that would enable, this process would enable that to work itself out.
Just a couple of questions. Kitty Corp make quite a bit of money, so I have concerns over them taking over a lease where there was a community-based activity there rather than a commercial business. And I sort of, going back on what we've just discussed, I'm not in favour of just talking to them directly. I'd prefer option 3 where we go out and advertise it to the wider community because there may be other activities which are more suitable. So although perhaps there is a need for a kindergarten in that area, I'm not in favour of the lease being granted to Kitty Corp in the first instance. I'm more in favour of option 3, where we go out for alternative proposals.
I did raise that with Wayne from Kitty Corp when he came in to talk to us. They do have 2 branches to the business. One is the full commercial daycare operation, where you take the child in at the start of the day, go off to work, come back at the end of the day, and it's a fully commercial operation. And then they have the community kindy as well, which is session based, and it's free, and it's based more around the needs of parents and children, to allow the children to socialise with other children in the community rather than to allow them to work. They also have 2 structures to the organisation. They have Kitty Corp Limited, which is the company, right, and they also have a trust. So the lease could be granted to the trust if that was an issue in terms of the business setup of the company.
Yeah, no, I'd still like to go out and be completely open and transparent about the site. I'm hugely in favour of the community garden, but I just think that we need this. If we do this, it's a long-term commitment, and I just think we owe it to the community to go a bit broader than that. That's just my own personal opinion, obviously.
Alison, did we not have an application from Kitty Corp where they was going to buy that, purchase their house on the side of the car park some years ago? Was that Kitty Corp?
They do have an option on a residential dwelling on the other side of the car park. Yeah. Yes, they do. And they're holding that in their back pocket until this is resolved. So that's a fallback option for them.
And I also see where they talk about a 30-year lease.
That's what they've requested.
But we can't give them a 30-year lease, can we?
The Reserves Act allows us to grant up to 33 years, and the RMA allows us to go up to 35.
I thought it was 19 something.
It used to be 19.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it used to be 19 years, 364 days, but the RMA's changed since then. Yeah.
Okay.
The other option is that if Lakeland Bowling Club were just to walk away from this, we would potentially have the liability of dealing with the building and the greens and all the improvements on there, because if they're now getting to the stage where they are not viable to run as an organisation, then they would find it very difficult to deal with the disposal of those improvements themselves, and it may just fall into council's hands.
Because Kitty Corp have got the 2 separate arms, and one is a community arm that is a trust, then I'm happy for a free kindergarten to go in an area.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just on that topic, Councillor Stewart, I just Googled them, and I think it's only a limited amount of community kindy, 30 hours free for 3 to 5-year-olds. Conditions apply according to their website.
Which is every preschool.
That's the same. Yeah. It's always.
But for 30 hours free, so there's only limited time. So there is obviously a commercial bent to it as well.
30 hours is pretty significant, though, isn't it?
Is it right?
Yeah, that will be how they are making money. They're just allowing them for the 30 hours, which you get more money.
Right.
The government pays that extra money that the parent would normally pay, and they're just limiting them to that amount of hours, so they're getting the maximum hours. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm saying that it is, it's still free 30 hours, but I'm a bit thinking about that going on, unless is it going to be a commercial lease? Like what kind of lease are we looking at offering them for the land? Because that's a commercial venture, so is it commercial rates? It's not community.
Well, if they weren't leasing an area of council reserve, they would have to be leasing an area of private land on a commercial basis. So yes.
Yeah, and so that's kind of
so it does for this particular person. It has a commercial value. We would have to get that valued by a valuer.
Yeah, I agree.
So should that be part of the
If we do it for one
resolution, being as this is a commercial entity that we're going to lease to?
Well, if that was to be part of the consultation that was to be held with the community, and they were to ask that question, then it would be useful to have a decision from council if you wish to make a decision now whether it was to be on a commercial basis.
I just don't think we can do it for one company and one kindy when we've got a lot of great kindies throughout the district who wouldn't be entitled to this same
Well,
sort of
it's on a
setup.
commercial basis, sure.
Absolutely.
And sorry.
Yeah.
And the other thing, currently, is it right that they're only doing the after school? Currently?
Currently they're only doing the after school.
After school. So basically, we're allowing them to set up a whole totally new business. Maybe we should be putting it out there so any other daycare can set up a new business potentially.
That is always an option. Yes.
Because I tend to.
It has been identified that there is a lack in that community of preschool care and education. So that would be an option, obviously, if council wished to make that area available for that purpose, would be to open it up to anyone.
And then any business that's set up there, every child would be every 3 and 4 year old would be eligible for those 3 hours, regardless if they work full time or did the session, or every child would be eligible for that.
Councillor Body, you did jump in fairly quickly and move the suggested resolution.
Well, I've read it, Mr. Chairman. I don't see why we're debating how they run their business. That's up to them. They also state with the additional area there, they talked about a Montessori kindergarten, a full daycare facility for infants. So I see no reason why we should not grant them what they're after. So I move the resolution.
You're still happy to move the suggested resolution, so is there
Through
a
the-
seconder?
Yeah, second it.
Councillor Lynch? Would you like to speak, or
No,
your second?
I generally support Councillor Body's view on that one.
Through the chair, I'm a little bit puzzled is that if we're supporting this, we're almost going contrary to what we just did before. On one hand, we're saying we're not going to go out to consultation, and then in the very next step, we're saying we're going out for consultation on the reserves management plan. So I'm a sort of a,
Alison, perhaps Alison could reiterate her view on that originally.
Sorry, what was that?
I guess, Mr. Chairman,
with
what I'd say on that
consultation.
one is that if you were to make this decision, and there's a resolution that's been moved and seconded and needs to be debated, then you would be doing it on the basis of the information in the report, which includes the fact that the bowling club is struggling financially, and you as the landlord would have got the issue of the buildings if the bowling club can't remove it. You've got a commercial situation for you. So again, it's up to you as a governance body. Do you say no, full stop, or do you say we'll go out and test the market generally, or do you say we've got a bird in the hand, it's the same, and let's treat with that person? And that's totally over to you. I think it is consistent with whatever you decide is consistent with the last decision making, because there's a specific set of circumstances around it.
Okay. Just then, following on from that, if one were to be of the mind to agree with that with 1 or 2 minor amendments, would that set a precedent for other future uses of reserve?
And just to ask, if we did go out and ask if anyone else was interested, would we lose these people? Possibly. Did you say they've got another option?
They do have another option, so potentially if the delay doesn't work for them, they may exercise that other option. The other difficulty is that if we were to go out and test the market, what we get back might not be able to work with the buildings that the bowling club have there. So they may not be able to easily utilise the assets. They might not wish to purchase the bowling club's building, so the bowling club would end up out of pocket. Council may end up having to remove the buildings and provide a clean site for a new tenant, whereas the offer we have on the table at the moment utilises the existing buildings. So the bowling club can realise some of the value of their assets, and council doesn't run the risk that we're going to end up having to deal with an abandoned building.
So I'm hearing that it's probably more useful to take the bird in the hand, which is there,
sensible.
which is logical, and it doesn't sound like we're going to have a lot of other interest.
There is less risk associated with that option.
But by going out, we could lose these people.
Potentially, yes.
I just want to be really clear here. We don't own the buildings. The bowling club own the buildings. Okay? There's two separate issues here. So when you're thinking this through, just remember that those buildings are owned by the bowling club, not by council, and officers' advice would be not to have a liability on that site should they walk away. So that liability needs to be removed.
I could support the suggested resolution, but I am concerned about probably the lease rental and it being a commercial entity, the kiddie court, and I think there should be something in that first clause to flag a commercial lease rental as opposed to a community rental.
Mr. Chairman, just with your leave, and you have to go back to the mover and seconder to agree. You could amend point 1 to say authorises consultation on the proposed new leases with parts of Waipahihi reserved to Kiddie Corp Limited and the Taupo Community Gardens Trust. Sorry, Kiddie Corp Limited on a commercial basis and the Taupo Community Gardens Trust, because the Gardens Trust isn't.
Yeah. I'd be more comfortable with that type of resolution.
You'd have to get the mover and
Yeah.
seconder. I'd agree with that.
You would agree? And John?
If they didn't agree with that, then
It's their choice.
then we go to
Well,
market.
Then we go to the market. Yes.
Yep.
Well, they do.
That's fair.
So with that,
No.
no? Sorry.
You can go to the open market, but you don't own the buildings.
No, I'm saying they do.
Yeah, they do.
Well, within parameters, it would have to come back here again.
It would have to come back here again.
And it's just to be clear, the risk of that commercial basis is that if you put, and it's just a risk, and we're just highlighting it out because that's our role, is that the negotiation is between the bowling club and Kiddie Corp. And by us putting this in there, if that falls over, then the risk is that Kiddie Corp walk away, bowling club have nobody, we get left with the building because bowling club walk away. But that's a risk. Life's full of risk.
You sound concerned.
Just want to make sure that council doesn't end up with a liability at the end of the day, and that I guess the bowling club can recoup some of the investment they made in that. So their intent is, if they don't find a tenant, to sell the building to clear the site. Now, whether or not they actually just break even on that is another issue.
John and Alison, you've talked to these people. Are they expecting to rent this as a community rent?
No, are they?
I mean,
No, they're expecting to pay a commercial rental.
oh, okay. Well, then we need to say that, I think, up front. They won't walk away because purchasing the house on the side of the car park is going to be far more expensive than leasing this or even purchasing it from the bowling club.
Yeah.
Surely.
Okay, so just one more question for me before I vote on this. Are there any long-term plans other than this activity for that reserve at the moment?
Not for that specific part of the reserve. If you look in the back of the...
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
That's the concept plan out of the sports ground management plan. So as you can see, that area is ring-fenced as the lease area, because at that time there was no expectation that that would change. We had identified the area and behind it for youth play facilities, but that's really not high on the list of priorities for carrying out, and then there's the road link that runs through into the EUL land. So that specific area, no, there's no alternative plans.
So can I play the devil's advocate very much against my council's wishes? But we know that the croquet team is ultimately looking for a new park or reserve, don't we?
Are they?
Not a croquet. Is it croquet?
Croquet have just...
Croquet was.
They've just spent lots of money doing up their greens. I don't think they want to move.
They're on Mary Road.
There was one club that was looking for bigger premises.
Not croquet.
Not croquet. They're struggling as well, eh?
Yeah.
That club have talked about growth, but the reality is, look at the age profile.
Yeah, hence the growth.
Okay. Right. Well, the amendment's been accepted by the mover and seconder. So I'll ask the councillors to vote on the suggested resolution. All in favour?
Aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6.